Okay, hello and welcome. Thanks for attending our session today on avoiding sinkholes with chest level strategies and Oracle implementations. So today's agenda, we'll talk about a little bit about who we are and who I am, pathways to the cloud, key questions to ask as you're going along your cloud journey, and which options you're going to choose, and how should you approach uh, your effort, as well as strategies to support you through a successful delivery and implementation. They'll have a summary on these items, and then, like I said earlier, a bit of Q&A at the end. We are project partners. We are an international technology group company, or also known as ITG. Project Partners has been around for about 25 plus years, supporting project-centric organizations in areas of ERP services ranging from Oracle EBS implementations, remediation support, as well as cloud ERP implementation, remediation support efforts there as well. We also offer services related to project execution, which would be the Primavera suite of products such as OPC, P6, Unifier, and those items. We were acquired a couple of years ago by the International Technology Group. This gives us a global reach to spread our experience across the globe to our clients and support them as appropriate. We have about a 15 plus industry experience bandwidth. This covers Europe, UK, some South America, and other areas. This gives us an infinite expert Oracle expertise across the globe. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm Bruce Mahan. I'm the VP of ERP Project Solutions here at Project Partners. Been in the Oracle space a little over 24 years, probably closer to 25 years now. Started out working primarily in the Oracle Project Suite of applications, but have also spent my efforts around building solutions for heavy capital intensive organizations, professional services firms, mining companies. It's just a broad bandwidth of industries. In addition to my experience within the Oracle space, I also bring to the table 12 years of project controls experience across commercial power, as well as shipbuilding and oil and gas industries. So we're going to do the picture tells a story bit here. So I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. As you can tell, I don't sound like I'm around here. I've been at Project Partners for 10 years, done about 30 plus implementations, but we're going to go clockwise from left to right. So as you see here, we have one of our favorite little things we like to eat, which is the crawfish. We typically get those starting in late December, and that runs pretty well through about the beginning of May before it gets too warm and we don't see them anymore. I also like to attend live music festivals. So what you see at the top picture there is a picture from this year's French Quarter Fest. It's held in April. I would offer you, if you want to have a good visit to New Orleans, that's a great weekend to come. Weather's good. Then down the bottom right, you see myself carrying a tray of what looks like some really small steaks to cook for some family and friends. I do enjoy cooking, and one of the main reasons you can probably figure out if you look at me is that I do like to eat. So it's. And then the middle picture there is my dog Ruby, who is always willing to listen intently to anything I have to say and is always open to any suggestions I may have. You can tell she has no attitude whatsoever. All right, now that we got that out of the way, we'll start talking about our pathways to the cloud. So really, in the space that Oracle is in now, there's really you're in a mode of where all roads lead to the cloud. There's three major pathways to get you there. You have your Oracle EBS to OCI. You have migration to cloud ERP, whether you're an Oracle EBS client or you're coming from a non-Oracle based system. And then you also have an approach that's known as a hybrid approach, whereas you have EBS in place with some cloud application components implemented, and you're working with both models at the same time. We'll talk more about these as we go further through the presentation. Some key drivers for moving to the cloud. The first one would be the focus on what your business does best versus getting into the mode of managing your infrastructure. So if you think about it, if you get to cloud, you get to move away from managing managing databases, managing servers, keeping up with DBAs, all that kind of stuff. So you end up getting a 38% lower total ownership cost hit, which is good. You reduce CapEx spend for maintaining hardware. Also, you have a 30% improved performance on the cloud model. So there's a hidden gain there that a lot of clients have not realized until they've gotten into the migration path and have completed the effort. You also have 10 times faster reporting, better availability, and faster technology refresh and patching, along with some quicker scalability components as well. You also are able to work with an ERP solution that is continually improved on a regular basis, and that really holds true whether you're on the cloud applications or if you go EBS to OCI, because the way Oracle is breaking up the patching for EBS now, they're separating the tech stack upgrades away from the application upgrades, so those can be done on a continual basis. And they're also changing the model on how you can upgrade your various application sets. So you can actually now update your applications separate of each other. So if you're on projects 12.2.12 and you want to go to 12.2.14, but you don't want to move anybody else up to the same level, you can do that now. You also gain access to applications with built-in Gen AI capabilities. Now with the cloud ERP offering, there are native Gen AI capabilities delivered in the applications. Those are being improved upon on a quarterly basis as more of those features are being released. From an EBS perspective, the Gen AI capabilities aren't delivered native to the apps, but if you upgrade to the Oracle Database 23 AI, I think it is, you start having more generative AI capability that you can build out on your own. There's been a lot of presentations about that this week. As a matter of fact, we have one coming up later this afternoon on this very topic at, I think it's 3:30. So let's talk about EBS to OCI, a little bit of pros and cons around this approach. If you look at it from a pros perspective, there's minimal change management involved with EBS to OCI because you're not changing the user interface. The users are used to working on EBS. It's just a different URL, okay? Also, your processing remains unchanged. You run the same sets of jobs. Your extensions are in place, all that kind of stuff. There's no data conversion involved, okay? So you're not migrating from one ERP to another, right? So you don't have to do that. It's also a quicker rollout model than going from EBS to like a cloud ERP, just because of the change management items that you won't have in place there, as well as there's no data conversion involved. And a big item for a lot of our clients who are looking at it from a standpoint of, hey, I've got a lot of extensions in, or I have a lot of integrations, or I have a lot of custom whatever I've done. This is where they look at it and say, I can get the benefit of the cloud without having to worry about solving the problem. How do I do it in the cloud ERP model? Some cons with this approach is that, as far as the patching goes, it's still up to the customer to make sure that the update patches are regularly applied, whereas in the cloud environment, those come in on a quarterly basis out of the chute, right? And there's a lack of application-based generative AI, which I spoke to earlier, but also you can do generative AI in EBS. It's just some more work on the user's end to get it in place. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a presentation today at 3:30 that's mentioned over here in the right-hand side of the slide that you're seeing on the screen right now for empowering EBS users with instant intelligence. All right. So let's move to the cloud ERP side of the coin and talk about pros and cons here. All right. From a pros perspective, your applications are continuously improved on a quarterly basis. This is the quarterly release bit that we talked about earlier. You have your generative AI capabilities that are delivered with the applications. But the other thing you get here is you get near real-time integration capabilities when you go to cloud ERP. In particular, if you leverage the Oracle Integration Cloud, or OIC. What this does, this offers the ability to leverage event-driven REST APIs to have an integration fire or another, where that integration is a PaaS solution that stays internal to Cloud ERP or goes out to a third-party product, right? So an example of this would be is you have an activity that, let's say, when I complete a task on a project, I need to notify the next person up that they're ready to go. So one of the events that's supported is task status change. So when you complete the task and say this task is closed, the status will cause this event to fire, which will fire the REST API, which will go through all the code logic for that integration and execute the steps. So you don't have to operate in the traditional batch mode processing that we've had in the past. From a cons perspective, it's significant change management with this model. That's not meant to be a detriment. It's just something you have to be aware of. Your change management will involve not only your business process changes that are going to come and go into Cloud ERP, because it's a very process-driven solution, but also you're going to have user interface changes, so the screens will look different. They'll be somewhat similar, but they will look different. There'll be different behaviors. Also, there's a longer delivery timeline than EBS to OCI, because you have data conversions will have to happen. The change management elements you have to manage is going through the process. Okay, look at our next model, which would be hybrid and EBS cloud ERP models. So there's really two scenarios here that you'll run into in this area. One is where you have one application set that's on cloud, and the rest of the ERP footprint is on EBS. An example of this would be, let's say you implement HCM Cloud, but you have EBS Financials, SCM, and projects in place. Okay. You can also have a model where you have one entity within a multi-org environment is fully on Cloud ERP, while the rest of the global organization stays on EBS. Okay. This model would require the entity that's on Cloud ERP, it's going to have its own ledger, right? So what you're going to get into here is like, okay, well, how do I support this if I go to either one of these? If you're looking at option one, where Oracle Cloud applications are used with some mix of EBS, Oracle does offer integrations between Cloud ERP and EBS, okay? But when you get to the model of Cloud ERP within a model of the rest of the organization on EBS, you have to take into consideration things like separate ledgers. Now I got to do consolidations and get my ledgers combined. So if you're leveraging a tool like EPM, then that smooths that process out. But you may have other third-party products in place where you would need to do integrations from that solution as well as the EBS solution. And this model will come up again in the presentation, and you'll see why we listed it here. All right, we're going to talk about essential questions that need to be asked. So there are really three main questions that you need to ask yourself, and the best thing I can tell you here is be honest when you try to answer them, and maybe even be brutally honest, okay? So the first question is, what are you trying to accomplish? You need to have a clear understanding of what the goal is, right? You need to also determine how much change will come to the organization based upon which method you're going to go with, right? This is a very important concept here, because without the change management aspects, which we'll get into later, these initiatives can be very dicey, or if not prone to failure, okay? And then the third option is third question is, how will we achieve our goals? And that's really driven out of, once you figure out how much, what you accomplish and how much change you're going to incur. What I'll say here is, if you can, make the effort to answer these and get to the details that you need to, it'll keep you out of bullet number 4, which is, while you're going through the implementation, continually asking yourself, what were we thinking and why are we doing this? Okay, because we've all been there, and it just tends to create more conflict as you're trying to move forward through the project. So let's talk about approaches. What are your goals for implementing your cloud-based solution? So we're going to go through several options here and what the goals would be, and then what the particular aspects of each of those would be. So the first scenario we have is we have a global enterprise that has disparate ERP systems with an on-prem EBS model. Okay, the goal here is we want to get on a unified platform for all our entities. All right. So the way you would go about this, and you'll notice a common theme as we start going through these, is everything's going to start with assess. Okay, and we'll talk to that a little bit later as well. So in this model, we want to conduct a readiness assessment to identify like our potential gaps in the business process. You migrate your on-premise EBS entities to OCI. Okay, you adopt any closures for business process gaps that are required, and then you take the entity that you migrated from EBS on-prem to OCI, and you leverage that as your proof of concept to make sure everything's stable, that the process works. Then you start rolling out this solution to the other entities in the organization based upon prioritization. You'll have strategic determinations to make to which regions, let's say, you'll bring on in what order. Okay, this will deliver a standard cloud platform for the global organization that allows you to plan your migration to Oracle Cloud ERP in a longer time frame versus trying to figure out how to do it, dealing with multiple ERP systems and EBS and the massive change that would come from that. Another option is to look at a global enterprise that's on a common on-prem EBS model. Okay, in this case, the client has got a highly extended solution and needs to have access to their custom code. Okay, so once again, we perform our assessment to identify any kind of impacts we may have with integration points or process changes, things like that. And then what we'll do is we test those. We migrate and we test. We perform remediation testing on all our custom objects to make sure everything's working fine. And then we release the instance to the business. So what happens here is the customer ends up with a instance that gives them a cloud-based global enterprise solution, but also allows them to maintain their custom code, which is one thing you can't do on cloud ERP. You can't write as much customization in cloud ERP as you can in EBS. It's a different structure as to how you do it. Okay, but both of these options allow customers with a complex EBS solution the ability to take advantage of the cloud offering and still have time to sort out what we want to do for determining what our readiness to go to the cloud application set is. I mean, I believe the standing guidance right now is still 10 years of support for EBS. So you've got time to work through that while you're leveraging the advantages of being on the cloud database. So we're going to pause in talking about things for a minute and do a little promotion here. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in Gatlin E2, we'll be having a panel discussion with our client Atkins Realis, who is going through this process as we speak. They were an example of a global organization with multiple disparate ERP systems with an on-prem EBS. So they've gone through the process of migrating to OCI and are now in the process of going through a global rollout of their EBS platform, along with, at the same time, when they migrated EBS to OCI, they also took EPM from on-prem to the cloud. So there'll be a good conversation, a lot of information coming out of that on what their actual experiences were going through that process. And if you want to scan the QR code, I'll wait just a second here. And then I'll have another reminder at the end of the presentation about it as well. So back to our options and goals. So now we're going to look at it from a cloud ERP migration versus the OCI migration. So in this instance, we have a global cloud ERP migration customer that once again wants a unified platform for all their entities. At this point, we conduct a readiness assessment. And this time we're looking at gaps in business processes, because those could be impacted based upon whatever our legacy system was compared to what the cloud ERP application set will do, gaps in user knowledge, integrations, and other critical areas. Once you're through that process, then what you do is you select what I would say is a mid-sized entity within the company. You pick one. This is not to be one of the largest entities within the company, but it is one that performs the majority of the standard business processes that you undertake. And what you do is you leverage this group as the proof of concept for your cloud solution, right? You let that process run for a period of time as you see fit. Once you are satisfied that solution is stable, then you can commence rolling that solution out across the rest of the enterprise based upon your strategy, okay? What this does is it delivers a standard platform for your global organizations to get the cloud ERP, but allows you the capability to adjust the solution as it's rolled out across the enterprise. So if you find something that wasn't quite right the first time you rolled it out, you can address it before you roll it out to the next wave. Or maybe there's a statutory or legal issue that you get because you're moving to a different region. You need to do something a little different over here, so you have time to get that sorted out before you roll it on to the next area. The last option we got here is really, a cloud ERP cloud ERP migration customer that's coming at it from a single entity, single ledger, with non-legacy Oracle system. Basically, here you're doing the same steps. You're going to do your assessment, your race assessment, like we mentioned earlier, to identify any gaps in business processes, user knowledge, integrations, that kind of thing. In this case, you don't need to do a phase rollout, right? It's just going to be a big bang, right? And so in this case, with a big bang rollout, you get a rapid return on your timeline because you actually can bring the entire org up at one time. All right? Yes?
You have EBS on-prem moving to OCI.
Right.
Eventually, they may want to move to cloud.
Right.
So they have all of these extensions and customizations. As you say, moving to cloud, it doesn't quite accommodate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question for everybody, if everybody heard the question, but the question, I'm going to try to summarize it. And you tell me if I got it straight. So the question is you have a company that's an EBS company, has a lot of customizations, integrations, whatnot in place. And the question is about moving to OCI versus moving to cloud ERP, right? Is it, if they move to cloud ERP, are they going to lose all those integrations and all that stuff? It's not so much that you're going to lose them, okay? They'll have to be redeveloped, right? So part of the process would be to analyze all that custom stuff and say, well, do I need item X? Well, actually, no, because there's functionality within Cloud ERP that does that out of the box. Great. Next one, well, there's nothing there, so we're going to have to do something, right? The advantage is if you have a lot of that, right, what you can do is if you take the step to OCI, you can get up on the cloud, take advantage of the database processing, the ability to get the generative AI components up and running, that kind of thing, and you won't be rushed through that process of doing the analysis, because a lot of times what I've seen happen is, organizations will run through and say, yeah, we don't need that one, or we got to have them all, or whatever, and it's not really a good deep analysis of those integration items or custom objects to see if they need them. And then when they start to move forward, they're scrambling, trying to figure out what to do, and ends up delaying the project. But yeah, you don't necessarily lose it per se, but you're going to have to rewrite it.
But it's still doable.
Yeah, yeah. You have to do them through past solutions. The way you do them is completely different from what you do on EBS. And the APIs, you'll find that the APIs don't exactly, like on the EBS side, the APIs are very, you can do multiple functions within an API, right? In some cases, in cloud ERP with the REST APIs, you have to call multiple APIs to do the same thing you would do through one API over here. It's stuff it's the minefield I've run into in doing these things. Question over here.
So on the phase rollout, after having done the Big Bang approach for EBS,
Mm-hmm.
the phase rollout's really attractive. I guess I just want to hear somebody say that if you do the phase rollout, say you move your HCM product first,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, move it ahead of everything else. With this Oracle, will all the backwards integration back to EBS still work?
Yeah.
We know that?
I'll be completely honest with you here, is that model, the model of the phase rollouts that I've dealt with are not that type of phase rollout. The phase rollouts I've dealt with are set the organization up, a organization up, right, on cloud ERP. So if you think about if you're a global org, you take a business unit and set that up take one of your multiple business units and stand them up and have them run on cloud. Then you bring, once that's stable, you bring the next business unit, and you roll it that way. Well, semantics on Big Bang, but yeah, Big Bang to me is you took the whole flipping global enterprise and dropped them in at one shot. What I'm saying is take one legal entity, move that through it, take the next one. It's still a phased rollout. When you look around at the clients we've dealt with and organizations we've worked with, that's been the approach. We just haven't got into a lot of it. I'm not saying it can't be done, what you're referring to. It's just that in our experience, we haven't really gotten into that much.
Because that's our main thought process.
Yeah.
Module at the time, and backwards integration
Yeah.
with EBS.
Yeah, there's
This elephant over a number of years.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
what you're saying to me just still feel like Big Bang.
Yeah, and I have talked with companies that have looked at like, hey, I'm on EBS, but I'm wanting to go to a SaaS solution for supply chain, right? And then they're like, well, you're already on EBS, you could, and I've met with some of our colleagues, and yeah, you can take SCM as an example and take it up to the cloud and have it integrate back to EBS. So that's there. It's just that I don't know that it's there for every piece. That you know how it is, because the applications are developed by different teams and whatnot. You know how that goes, right? Okay. So we'll go to the next slide here. Good questions. So strategies, how much change are we introducing? How are we going to achieve our goals? So basically the big thing you want to look at is change management. We're just going to pause the slide here for a second. Change management is usually something that's kind of overlooked through this process. And if you look at the three major approaches that we've talked about, where you had a global organization that was going to move to the EBS to OCI model, right? If you look at the change management impact there, it's mostly the tool, right? And maybe some processes. There's not much hit to the users in that space. If you're looking at a global organization that's going to go to a cloud ERP, the change management's multifaceted there. You end up with, tool changes, impacts to personnel and training, user interface, how do your integrations work, all that kind of stuff. And if you're going with a straight just cloud, single entity kind of cloud ERP migration, it's the same kind of things, except you're not having to focus on, I've got a longer runway like you would on the middle option where I've got the phased rollout. You're not necessarily supporting multiple ERP systems, at the same time. So, how to prepare for cloud readiness is really, you want to perform a readiness assessment. So you want to make sure you've got documentation of your current solution and your integration points, that you've identified your bottlenecks and pain points. You have proposed updates to processes, maybe tool selections are changing, different tools will be used. Also, make sure you've got all your gaps documented, understood, and potential solutions for those gaps. This leads you to developing a change roadmap because this tells you all the things that you're going to have to deal with. Also from this, you should be able to get a timeline for your effort for the implementation process. All these bullet points here really, contribute to an effective change management plan. You can take these components and start building out your change management plan for your roadmap to be implemented. So some focus areas around a readiness assessment. So, the big thing that you want to get out of this is, how do we get there? And what you want to avoid are some of the leadership mistakes that we have listed here on the screen, where maybe there's some underestimating of the complexity of the initiative, ineffective communications, maybe there's not enough resources. One of the big ones I see that from time to time is ignoring resistance to the change that's coming. You'll have management that'll say, well, they'll come around, and they don't come around. Those people don't come around, or those groups don't come around. And it ends up causing, friction and delays when getting the project executed. One of the things that I have noted on how some assessments are executed is they're really aimed at the future state. It's focused on, it looks at, hey, how do we get here from a timeline perspective, an effort perspective? That's great, but what it's not looking at is the real point about how you get there is how do you leverage your internal staff to drive the project forward, okay? And if you can do that, that is a bonus to you that they'll pay itself back, time over time, with no issues. The idea is that if you can leverage the best practices I've seen used is taking your internal resources, identifying who is going to be responsible for working the project from an internal resource perspective. And if they can be dedicated to that effort full time, that's great. If there's a way to get it to a majority of the time, that's good as well. What this does, if you can get internal resources committed to the project, you can actually drive your ownership and adoption into the design phase of the project rather than waiting towards the end when you're getting in through your test cycles, okay? So your early ownership builds momentum, through the life cycle of the project, supporting a higher user adoption at go live. You have improved internal capabilities, which means you have less external resource reliance. You have lower costs because your internal resources can pick up some of the load that your external resources have been carrying. And you have lower risk of schedule and cost impacts because you have the knowledge base in place to keep issues moving forward. So the other item that you need to focus on here really is what I call like the 3 lanes for success for any effort. You need to have an effective governance and strategic project or program management, which helps you get to a better risk management model. Make sure you're aligned with your organizational goals and you have the appropriate stakeholder engagement. The second item is your communications and organizational change management. This gives you a higher success rate with this in place. You have improved risk management and mitigation, and you have reduced resistance to what is being proposed. Also, the last one here is what we refer to as the hybrid delivery model. And this is a model that leverages your key concepts from agile and your traditional waterfall project planning and execution. And to see how these 3 items come together, I'm going to flip it over to the next slide. And what you can see here is they really kind of stack on top of each other. So you have, see if this works. That doesn't work either. Okay. So you have the governance and project and program management at the top. You have your communications or change management in the middle. Then you have your delivery, is all the boxes at the bottom. Now what you'll notice here is over in the phase 0 section where it says define, this is more your waterfall approach. You do your assessment, you define what you're going to be doing, you come up with a high level solution design. Then once that's done and you move into that build and test phase, that's when you go to like an agile approach, right? You sprint it out and work through the process. What this shows you, if you have these things in place, you have alignment from governance and project program management, change management, and delivery. You have that baked in. The fact that you're using an agile model through the delivery and build allows you to identify issues as you work through the process, refine the solution to be correct, address those, take that back up to the change management team, because it could be communications that need to come out about that, so everybody's on the same page. And also it keeps the governance and project management team in alignment with everything that's going on. We have a project that we're running right now that this is the model that we're running through, and it has been extremely effective. And this is the group that we'll be talking to tomorrow morning. Has been extremely effective in keeping us moving forward on the project with minimal delays. What I have seen is that really where the challenges come in to companies taking on these efforts is not so much, could be some things in governance and program management, but the biggest thing is the guy in the middle, the communication and the change management, because if you have that baked out, then you fully understand what's coming, okay? All right, we'll move into a little bit of a review and just go through the key concepts real quick, and then we'll be through this, get you back out here in time for some lunch. So from the pathways to the cloud, we talked about three main models: EBS to OCI, migration to cloud ERP, whether you're coming from Oracle EBS or a non-based Oracle system, and then the hybrid approach, which could be one of two models. It could be a model of, I have a cloud application set in place with the rest of my business on EBS, or it could be the other model where in a global environment, I take a legal entity, put it on cloud, but the rest of the global org is on EBS. The essential questions that you need to make sure you're asking yourself is, once again, what do we make sure we know what we're trying to accomplish, that we've got a good, solid, honest evaluation of what changes will bring to the organization based upon the decisions we make. Don't underestimate that one. And then how we achieve our goals. That one you can answer better if you have solid answers to the first two above it. And if you do that, that keeps you out of the repetitive, why are we doing this? What were we thinking when we started kind of thing. From an approaches standpoint, we talked about EBS to OCI or cloud ERP, right? You're looking at, models of a global enterprise on disparate ERP systems with on-prem EBS, or a global enterprise with a common on-prem EBS. Either way, this model supports organizations that need more time to make that the technical evaluation to move to cloud ERP if you're in an environment with a lot of, we'll just call them rice elements. If you have a lot of rice elements, then this will help give you more time to work through that, but allow you to take advantage of the cloud database, as we said earlier. From a cloud ERP standpoint, you've got your global cloud ERP migration, where we talked about setting it up to where one legal entity would go first and everybody else would follow after that legal entity is set. And then a single entity you would do in a big bang. With this one, the advantages you get that your applications are updated according and equipped with generative AI that we've talked about several times throughout the presentation. But you also get that near real-time integration capability with OIC, with the event-based REST APIs. Strategies. So basically the big thing is make sure you perform a solid cloud readiness assessment. Make sure you understand, how do we fully get there? How do we get there is not a timeline and a bunch of money. It's where my resources are. Do I have the adequate resources both externally and internally to get this thing done? Make sure that you're taking advantage of your internal resources and trying to get them involved up in the front of the project during the design phase, because that'll help you build out better ownership and get you a good ROI as you come through this process. The 3 lanes to success that we talked about: your governance, your change management, your hybrid waterfall agile delivery method. If you have those 3 aligned, you'll be in great shape, okay? And then lastly, the benefits that I tried to jump to earlier. From the pathways perspective, Oracle's cloud offering, allows businesses to concentrate on their core competencies instead of dealing with infrastructure management and those kinds of things. You'll hear that time and time again. If you go talk to anybody out here that's done that, that's the first thing that they'll tell you, that I've gotten away from having to worry about that. I can focus on just running the business. EBS to OCI and cloud ERP as far as approaches, either one can support tailored cloud adoption based on your organizational readiness and your demands. And then from a strategy standpoint, we mentioned it before, just make sure you have those you get great success through those 3 lanes of success that we talked about a little while ago. Okay, so what I want to remind you again one more time of is tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Gatlin E2. This is the panel discussion about, with one of our clients who's actually gone through this process, that you'll hear their story on what they've done from either the EBS to OCI and that journey, and EPM to cloud, and how they managed to pull together multiple ERP systems into that solution as well. Okay. Any questions, comments, thoughts? I see no thought bubbles, so I think we're done. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Be sure to fill out the session survey in the conference app for this, and I appreciate you taking your time to come out and visit with us today. Thank you.